Sarah walked through the busy streets of London with her friends, feeling frustrated and angry. She had just received another rejection letter from a job she really wanted. At 22 years old, she felt like the world was against her. Her friends kept telling her to cheer up, but nothing seemed to work. "Let's go see Buckingham Palace," suggested her friend Emma. "Maybe seeing the famous guards will make you feel better." Sarah rolled her eyes but followed along. She didn't care about tourist attractions or fancy places. Everything felt pointless to her right now. As they approached the palace gates, crowds of people were taking pictures and admiring the magnificent building. The royal guards stood perfectly still in their red uniforms and tall black hats, looking straight ahead without moving a muscle. "Look at them," Sarah muttered, standing there like statues, thinking they're so important. Her friends tried to quiet her down, but Sarah's anger was growing. She had been dealing with rejection after rejection, and seeing these guards who seemed to have such prestigious jobs made her feel even worse about her own situation. She started walking closer to one of the guards, a tall man with kind eyes who remained completely motionless despite the chaos around him. "Must be nice to have such an easy job," Sarah said loudly, hoping to get a reaction. "Just stand there all day doing nothing." The guard didn't move or acknowledge her comment. This made Sarah even more frustrated. She felt invisible, like nobody cared about her problems or her existence. All around her, tourists were taking photos and laughing, completely unaware of the pain she was carrying inside. Emma grabbed Sarah's arm. "Come on, let's go." "You're making a scene," but Sarah pulled away. She was tired of being ignored, tired of feeling like she didn't matter. The guard's complete stillness somehow represented everything she felt was wrong with the world. People in positions of power who didn't care about ordinary people, struggling to make it. "I'm talking to you," Sarah said, stepping even closer to the guard. "Don't you have anything to say?" The guard continued to stare straight ahead, his face showing no emotion. His training had taught him to remain professional no matter what happened around him. He had dealt with difficult tourists before, but something about this young woman seemed different. Behind her aggressive words, he could sense deep pain and frustration. Sarah's voice got louder. "You think you're better than everyone else, don't you? Standing there in your fancy uniform while real people struggle to find work?" Other tourists started to notice the commotion. Some pulled out their phones to record what was happening. Sarah's friends looked embarrassed and tried to convince her to leave, but she refused to move. "Sarah, please," whispered her friend Jake. "You're going to get in trouble." But Sarah didn't care anymore. She felt like she had nothing left to lose. Every door had been closed in her face, every opportunity had slipped away. Now she was taking out all her frustration on this guard who represented everything she couldn't have. The guard, whose name was Thomas, had been serving for 5 years. He had learned to handle all kinds of situations while maintaining his composure. But as he listened to Sarah's words, he began to understand that her anger wasn't really about him. She was hurting, and this was her way of expressing pain she couldn't handle anymore. "You probably get paid more in a month than I could make in 6 months at any job I can find," Sarah continued, her voice cracking slightly. "And for what? Standing there looking pretty for tourists?" The crowd was getting larger now. Some people were shaking their heads in disapproval at Sarah's behavior, while others seemed entertained by the drama. Security officers nearby were starting to take notice, and Sarah's friends knew the situation was about to get much worse. Thomas could see the tears forming in Sarah's eyes. Even though she was trying to hide them behind her anger, he recognized the look of someone who had reached their breaking point. In his years of service, he had learned to read people, and he could tell that this young woman wasn't a troublemaker. She was someone in crisis. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," Sarah shouted, her voice echoing off the palace walls. The security officers began moving closer, ready to intervene. Sarah's friends grabbed her arms, trying to pull her away before she got arrested. But Sarah stood her ground, staring at the guard who continued to look straight ahead with professional discipline. What Sarah didn't know was that Thomas was fighting his own internal battle. Every instinct told him to maintain his position and wait for security to handle the situation. But his heart was telling him something different. He could see that this wasn't about disrespecting the monarchy or causing trouble. This was about a young person who felt completely lost and alone. The crowd held its breath as the tension continued to build. Sarah's anger was reaching its peak, and the security officers were almost within reach. It seemed like the situation would end with Sarah being arrested and escorted away. becoming just another news story about a tourist behaving badly at the palace. But Thomas was about to make a decision that would change everything. As he stood there listening to Sarah's pain disguised as anger, he remembered why he had chosen to serve his country in the first place. It wasn't just about protecting buildings or following protocol. It was about serving people, even when they couldn't see past their own pain to ask for help properly. The next few moments would determine whether this encounter would end in embarrassment and legal trouble for Sarah, or whether something completely unexpected would happen that would touch the hearts of everyone watching. Thomas felt his heart racing beneath his perfectly pressed uniform. The training manual had clear instructions about maintaining position and letting security handle disruptive visitors. But as he watched Sarah's face, he saw something that reminded him of his own sister during her darkest moments. The same desperate look, the same way of lashing out when everything felt hopeless. Sarah raised her voice even higher, attracting more attention from passers-by. "You're all the same. You don't care about real people with real problems." The security officers were now just steps away, their hands moving toward their radios to call for backup. Sarah's friends had given up trying to calm her down and were preparing to watch their friend get arrested. The crowd of tourists was growing larger, many holding up phones to record what they assumed would be another viral video of someone getting into trouble. Then something extraordinary happened. Thomas slowly turned his head and looked directly at Sarah. The movement was so unexpected that the entire crowd fell silent. Even Sarah stopped talking, shocked that she had finally gotten a reaction from the stoic guard. "I hear you," Thomas said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Sarah blinked in surprise. She had expected to be ignored until security dragged her away. She hadn't expected kindness, and she certainly hadn't expected the guard to break protocol just to acknowledge her. "What?" she whispered, suddenly feeling vulnerable now that she had his attention. Thomas maintained eye contact with her, something that went completely against his training. "I said I hear you. You're in pain and you're angry and you feel like nobody cares. I understand." The security officers stopped in their tracks, confused about how to handle this unprecedented situation. The crowd was mesmerized, realizing they were witnessing something far more meaningful than a simple tourist disruption. Sarah felt tears threatening to spill over. You're not supposed to talk?" "No, I'm not," Thomas admitted with a slight smile. "But sometimes rules need to be broken for the right reasons." For the first time in months, Sarah felt like someone was actually seeing her as a person, rather than just a problem to be dealt with. The anger that had been building up inside her for so long began to crack, revealing the deep sadness and fear underneath. "I can't find a job anywhere," she said, her voice much quieter now. "I've been trying for 8 months. Every interview ends the same way. I'm starting to think there's something wrong with me." Thomas nodded, understanding. 8 months is a long time to keep facing rejection. That would be hard for anyone. The crowd was completely silent now, drawn into this unexpected moment of human connection. Many people were lowering their phones, realizing that recording this intimate conversation felt wrong. "My friends think I should just keep trying, but I'm tired," Sarah continued. "I'm tired of being rejected, tired of feeling worthless, tired of pretending everything is okay when it's not." Thomas looked around at the security officers and gave them a subtle signal that everything was under control. They hesitated but decided to trust his judgment and maintained their distance. "Can I tell you something?" Thomas asked Sarah. She nodded, wiping away a tear that had escaped despite her efforts to stay strong. "Before I became a guard, I was unemployed for 11 months. 11 months of rejection letters, failed interviews, and feeling like I would never find my place in the world." Sarah's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" "I applied for everything. Office jobs, retail positions, restaurant work. Nobody wanted me. I started to believe that maybe I wasn't good enough for anything." The crowd around them had grown even larger, but nobody was speaking. Everyone seemed to understand that they were witnessing something special and didn't want to interrupt. "What changed?" Sarah asked. Thomas smiled. "I learned that my worth as a person wasn't determined by whether or not someone would hire me. I started volunteering at a local community center, helping people who were struggling just like I was. It didn't pay anything, but it reminded me that I had value beyond what was written on my resume." Sarah felt something shifting inside her chest. For months, she had been so focused on what she couldn't do, what she couldn't achieve, that she had forgotten about what she could offer to the world. "The job I have now," Thomas continued, "it's not just about standing here looking official. It's about representing something bigger than myself. It's about serving people, protecting what matters, and being part of something meaningful." One of the tourists in the crowd, an elderly woman named Margaret, stepped forward. "Excuse me, dear," she said to Sarah. "I couldn't help but overhear. What kind of work are you looking for?" Sarah turned to look at her, surprised by the interruption. I studied marketing, but I've been applying for anything, really." Margaret smiled warmly. "My grandson runs a small marketing company here in London. They've been looking for someone young and passionate to join their team. Would you be interested in meeting with him?" Sarah stared at Margaret in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. Sometimes the best opportunities come from the most unexpected places." Thomas watched this interaction with growing amazement. What had started as a confrontation was transforming into something beautiful. He had broken protocol to show compassion to someone in need, and now that compassion was creating ripples of kindness throughout the crowd. Another person in the crowd, a middle-aged man named David, spoke up. "I work in human resources. If that opportunity doesn't work out, I'd be happy to review your resume and give you some feedback." Then a young woman named Lisa added, "I run a job seeker support group that meets every Thursday. You're welcome to join us. Sometimes it helps to talk to other people who understand what you're going through." Sarah looked around at all these strangers who were suddenly offering to help her, and she felt overwhelmed by their kindness. "I don't understand," she said. "Why are you all being so nice to me? A few minutes ago I was yelling at him and making a fool of myself." Thomas answered her question. "Because you showed us something real. You showed us your pain. And that reminded all of us that we're human beings who need each other. Your honesty opened the door for everyone else to show their compassion." The security officers who had been prepared to arrest Sarah just minutes earlier were now watching with smiles on their faces. They had never seen anything like this happen during their shifts. Sarah wiped away more tears, but these were different from the angry tears she had been fighting earlier. These were tears of relief, gratitude, and hope. She looked at Thomas with new understanding. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I was horrible to you and you didn't deserve that." Thomas shook his head gently. "You don't need to apologize. You were hurting, and sometimes when we're in pain we don't know how else to express it." Margaret, the elderly woman who had offered to connect Sarah with her grandson, pulled out her phone. "Here, let me get his number for you. His name is James, and I know he would love to meet someone with your passion." As Margaret scrolled through her contacts, other people in the crowd began sharing their own stories. A young man named Alex talked about how he had been unemployed for 6 months before finding his current job. A woman named Rachel shared how she had changed careers 3 times before finding work that fulfilled her. "The thing is," Rachel said to Sarah, "everyone acts like having a job is the most important thing in the world. But what really matters is finding the right fit. Sometimes the rejections are protecting you from jobs that wouldn't have made you happy anyway." Sarah listened to each story with growing amazement. She had felt so alone in her struggle, but now she was discovering that almost everyone around her had faced similar challenges. They had all experienced rejection, disappointment, and moments of feeling worthless. Thomas watched the conversation with deep satisfaction. He had made a choice to break protocol, and it had created something beautiful. But he also knew that his supervisors would want to know what had happened here today. Breaking the rules, even for good reasons, would have consequences. A senior security officer named Captain Williams approached the group. He had been watching from a distance and needed to address the situation. The crowd noticed him coming and grew quiet, worried that the magical moment was about to be interrupted by official business. "Guard Thompson," Captain Williams said formally. Thomas straightened up and prepared to face whatever discipline was coming his way. "Yes, sir." "You broke protocol today." "Yes, sir, I did." The crowd held its breath, expecting Thomas to be reprimanded or worse. Sarah felt a wave of guilt, realizing that her actions might have gotten this kind man in trouble. Captain Williams looked around at the gathered crowd, then back at Thomas. "You broke protocol, and in doing so you demonstrated exactly why we serve. You showed compassion, wisdom, and true leadership." Thomas looked surprised. "Sir, what you did here today represents the very best of what it means to serve others. You saw someone in need and you chose to help even when it meant taking a personal risk." The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah felt overwhelming relief that Thomas wouldn't be punished for his kindness. Captain Williams continued, "This young woman came here angry and frustrated, and instead of simply having her removed, you found a way to address the real problem. That's not just good security work, that's good human work." Sarah stepped forward. "Sir, I want you to know that this man changed my life today. I came here feeling hopeless and angry, and he showed me that there are still good people in the world who care about strangers." "What's your name?" Captain Williams asked Sarah. "Sarah Mitchell." "Well, Sarah Mitchell, you've helped remind all of us why we do this job. It's not about protecting buildings or following rules blindly. It's about serving people and making the world a little bit better." Margaret finished getting her grandson's contact information and handed it to Sarah. "James is expecting your call. He said he can meet with you tomorrow afternoon if you're available." Sarah looked at the piece of paper in her hands and felt a surge of hope she hadn't experienced in months. "I can't believe this is really happening." David, the human resources professional, handed her his business card. "Even if that interview goes well, please send me your resume. I'd like to give you some feedback that might help you in future interviews." Lisa, who had mentioned the support group, wrote down the meeting details. "Thursday at 7 in the evening at the community center on Baker Street. We're a friendly group and we'd love to have you join us." Thomas smiled as he watched Sarah collect contact information from multiple people who wanted to help her. The transformation was remarkable. The angry, desperate young woman from earlier had been replaced by someone filled with hope and gratitude. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said to Thomas, "Of course. How did you know? How did you know that I wasn't just a troublemaker looking for attention?" Thomas thought about his answer carefully. "I have a sister who went through something similar. She was struggling to find work and the rejection was eating away at her confidence. One day she had a breakdown in a grocery store, yelling at the cashier about something completely unrelated to her real problems." Sarah nodded, recognizing the behavior. The cashier could have called security, could have had her banned from the store. Instead, she asked my sister if she was okay, if there was anything she could do to help. That simple act of kindness changed everything for my sister. What happened to her? She found a job 2 weeks later. But more importantly, she found her faith in people again. The cashier's kindness reminded her that the world wasn't against her. She was just going through a difficult time. Sarah felt tears welling up again. "You did the same thing for me." "We all did," Thomas said, gesturing to the crowd that had formed around them. "When one person shows courage, either by being vulnerable like you were, or by showing kindness like the people here today, it gives everyone else permission to be their best selves too." A young photographer who had been taking pictures of the palace approached the group. "Excuse me, I hope you don't mind, but I captured some photos of what happened here today. It was so moving that I'd love to share the story if you're comfortable with that." Sarah looked uncertain. "I don't know if I want to be famous for yelling at a royal guard." The photographer smiled. "That's not the story I saw. I saw a story about human connection, about kindness triumphing over anger, about a community coming together to help someone in need. If you're willing to share it, I think it could inspire other people who are going through similar struggles." Sarah looked around at all the faces surrounding her, people who had been strangers just an hour ago but now felt like friends. She thought about how isolated she had felt that morning, and how different everything seemed now. If sharing this story could help someone else who feels as hopeless as I did this morning, then yes, I'd like to do that, she said to the photographer. Thomas felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not only had he helped Sarah, but now their interaction might reach other people who needed to hear this message of hope and human connection. The photographer, whose name was Michael, began asking thoughtful questions about what had happened. But he wasn't interested in sensationalizing the conflict. He wanted to understand the transformation that had occurred. "What was going through your mind when you first approached the guard?" Michael asked Sarah. Sarah thought carefully about her answer. "I felt invisible and worthless. I had been rejected so many times that I started to believe maybe I really wasn't good enough for anything. When I saw him standing there so perfectly, representing everything I couldn't achieve, I guess I wanted to make him feel as small as I felt. And what changed? He saw me, really saw me, not as a troublemaker or a problem to be solved, but as a person who was hurting. When someone truly sees you and acknowledges your pain, it's impossible to stay angry." Michael turned to Thomas. "You took a significant risk by breaking protocol. What made you decide to respond?" Thomas considered the question. In my training, we learn about protecting people and property. But I realize that sometimes protecting someone means protecting them from their own despair. Sarah wasn't really attacking me. She was crying out for help in the only way she knew how. Captain Williams, who had been listening to the conversation, added his perspective. What Guard Thompson did today represents the highest ideals of service. Rules exist to guide us, but wisdom knows when compassion should take precedence. Margaret was still standing with the group, beaming with pride at how the situation had evolved. You know, I've lived in London for 73 years and I've never seen anything quite like this. It reminds me why I still believe in the goodness of people. Sarah turned to Margaret with curiosity. Can I ask you something? Why did you offer to help me? You don't even know me, Margaret smiled warmly. Because 40 years ago I was in a similar situation. I had just moved to London from a small town, couldn't find work and felt completely lost. A stranger helped me when I needed it most, and I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to pay that kindness forward, I would. What happened with that stranger who helped you? She gave me a job at her small bakery. It wasn't glamorous work, but she treated me with dignity and taught me skills that I used for the rest of my career. More importantly, she showed me that London could be a place where people looked out for each other. David, the human resources professional, had been quietly observing the interactions. You know what strikes me about this whole situation? Sarah, your resume probably looks very similar to hundreds of other resumes that cross employers' desks. But today, we got to see who you really are. Your passion, your honesty, your ability to accept help and show gratitude. Those are the qualities that make someone valuable in any workplace. Sarah felt a new understanding dawning. You mean I've been focusing on the wrong things in my job search? Not wrong exactly, but incomplete. Technical skills and experience matter, but so do character traits like resilience, empathy, and the ability to connect with people. What happened here today showed all of those qualities. Lisa, who ran the support group, nodded in agreement. That's exactly what we talk about in our meetings. Job searching isn't just about proving you can do the work. It's about showing employers who you are as a person. Thomas had been thinking about something while listening to the conversation. Sarah, can I ask you what kind of work you really want to do? Not just any job, but what would make you excited to get up every morning? Sarah paused, realizing that in her desperation to find any employment, she had stopped thinking about what she actually wanted. I studied marketing because I love the idea of connecting people with things that could improve their lives. I want to help tell stories that matter, that make a real difference. Michael, the photographer, looked up from his notes. That's interesting. The way you're describing marketing sounds very similar to what I do as a journalist, telling stories that connect with people and make a difference. I never thought about it that way. There are so many different ways to use marketing skills. You could work for nonprofits, helping them reach people who need their services. You could work for small businesses, helping them grow and serve their communities better. You could even work in social media, creating content that inspires and connects people. Sarah's eyes lit up with possibilities she hadn't considered before. I've been applying for any marketing job I could find, but I never really thought about what kind of marketing I wanted to do. Margaret's grandson James called her phone at that moment. She answered and had a brief conversation before turning back to Sarah. James is very excited to meet you tomorrow. I told him about what happened here today, and he said it sounds like you have exactly the kind of authentic passion they're looking for in their company. Sarah felt a wave of nervousness mixed with excitement. What if I mess up the interview? Thomas answered her concern. You won't mess it up because you're not going to be pretending to be someone you're not. You're going to be yourself, the same person who showed incredible courage today by being vulnerable and honest. But what if being myself isn't good enough? Captain Williams spoke up. Young lady, I've been in leadership positions for 20 years, and I can tell you that authenticity is one of the rarest and most valuable qualities you can bring to any situation. What happened here today proved that you have that quality in abundance. The crowd that had gathered to watch the interaction was beginning to disperse, but many people stopped to speak with Sarah before leaving. A teacher offered to help her practice interview skills. A small business owner gave her advice about freelance marketing opportunities. A university student invited her to join a professional networking group for young marketers. By the time the crowd had thinned out, Sarah had collected more business cards and contact information than she had gathered in 8 months of job searching. But more importantly, she had rediscovered something she had lost: confidence in her own worth as a person. I don't know how to thank all of you, Sarah said to the small group that remained. Thomas smiled. You don't need to thank us. You gave us all a gift today, too. What gift? You reminded us why kindness matters. You showed us that taking a moment to really see someone and acknowledge their struggle can change everything. You made us all want to be better people. The next afternoon, Sarah stood outside a small marketing agency in central London, holding the piece of paper with James's address. She had spent the morning preparing for the interview, but this time felt different from all the others. Instead of desperately trying to become what she thought the employer wanted, she focused on being genuinely herself. She thought about Thomas's words about authenticity and took a deep breath before entering the building. The office was modern but cozy, with plants everywhere and artwork from local artists on the walls. It felt like the kind of place where creativity and genuine human connection were valued. James turned out to be a friendly man in his 30s with an easy smile and genuine warmth. You must be Sarah. My grandmother told me about your meeting yesterday. She was so impressed by your courage and honesty. Sarah felt herself relaxing. Your grandmother is an amazing woman. Her kindness yesterday changed everything for me. She has that effect on people. She's been my inspiration for how I try to run this business, with compassion and a focus on helping people rather than just making profit. As they sat down in his office, James explained more about the company. We work primarily with small businesses and nonprofits, helping them tell their stories in ways that connect with their communities. It's not just about selling products, it's about building relationships and making a real impact. Sarah's eyes lit up. That sounds exactly like what I hoped marketing could be when I first started studying it. Tell me about that. What drew you to marketing originally? For the first time in months, Sarah found herself talking passionately about her field instead of just trying to say what she thought the interviewer wanted to hear. She talked about her belief that good marketing should serve people, not manipulate them. She shared her ideas about using storytelling to help businesses build genuine connections with their customers. James listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was genuinely interested in her perspective. The conversation felt more like two colleagues discussing shared values than a traditional interview. Can I ask you about yesterday? James said. My grandmother told me you were going through a difficult time with job searching. How did that experience change your perspective? Sarah considered her answer carefully. It taught me that vulnerability and authenticity are strengths, not weaknesses. For months, I was so focused on trying to be perfect that I forgot to be real. Yesterday, when I finally let people see my real struggles, that's when genuine help and connection became possible. And how would you apply that lesson to marketing? I think the best marketing happens when businesses are willing to be authentic about who they are and what they value. Instead of trying to appeal to everyone, they should focus on connecting with people who share their values and genuinely need what they offer. James smiled. That's exactly the philosophy we try to follow here. The rest of the interview continued in the same spirit of genuine conversation. James showed Sarah some of the campaigns they had worked on, and she offered thoughtful insights and creative ideas. By the end of their meeting, both of them felt excited about the possibility of working together. I'd like to offer you a position on our team, James said, not just because my grandmother recommended you, but because I can see that you understand what we're trying to accomplish here. Sarah felt tears of joy threatening to spill over. Really? You're serious? Completely serious. I think you could bring a fresh perspective and a lot of passion to our work. As Sarah walked out of the office with a job offer in hand, she couldn't stop smiling. But even more than the job itself, she was grateful for the reminder that being herself was enough, more than enough. That evening, she attended Lisa's support group meeting. Walking into the community center on Baker Street, she felt nervous about sharing her story with a group of strangers. But she remembered how much it had helped to be vulnerable with the crowd at Buckingham Palace. The support group turned out to be a circle of about 12 people, all at different stages of their job search journeys. Lisa introduced Sarah and invited her to share whatever she felt comfortable sharing. Sarah told the group about her experience the day before, about her breakdown at the palace, and about how Thomas's kindness had changed everything. She talked about her interview that afternoon and the job offer she had received. But the most important thing I learned, she said, is that our worth as people isn't determined by whether or not we have a job. When I stopped seeing myself as just a resume and started seeing myself as a whole person with value to offer, everything shifted. One of the group members, a man named Robert who had been unemployed for over a year, spoke up. That's exactly what I needed to hear today. I had another rejection this morning and I was starting to think maybe I should just give up. Please don't give up, Sarah said. I know how hopeless it feels. But sometimes the breakthrough comes when you least expect it. A woman named Claire shared that she had been so focused on landing any job that she had forgotten to think about what kind of work would actually make her happy. Your story reminds me that maybe I should be more selective and focus on finding the right fit, rather than just any fit. Lisa facilitated the discussion skillfully, helping everyone share their experiences and support each other. By the end of the meeting, Sarah felt like she had found a community of people who understood her journey. As the group was ending, Robert approached Sarah. Would you mind if I got your contact information? I'd love to hear more about how you shifted your mindset. Of course, Sarah said, writing down her number. And if you ever need someone to practice interview skills with or just want to talk, please reach out. Walking home that night, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed in just 24 hours. She had a job offer, new friends, and most importantly, a completely different understanding of her own worth and capabilities. She thought about Thomas and wondered how he was doing. She had written him a thank you note that afternoon, but she wasn't sure if royal guards were allowed to receive personal mail. Still, she wanted him to know how much his kindness had meant to her. Sarah also thought about all the other people who had helped her. Margaret, David, Lisa, Captain Williams, Michael the photographer, and everyone else who had shown her compassion when she needed it most. She made a promise to herself to look for opportunities to pay that kindness forward. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. She had a new job to start, but more than that, she had a new understanding of what it meant to be part of a community that cares for each other. 3 months later, Sarah stood once again in front of Buckingham Palace, but this time everything was different. She was wearing professional attire, carrying a portfolio of marketing campaigns she had helped create, and most importantly, she was smiling genuinely for the first time in over a year. Thomas was at his post, maintaining the same perfect posture and professional demeanor that had initially frustrated her so much. But now Sarah understood that his discipline and dedication were forms of service, not arrogance. She approached him quietly, not wanting to cause another scene or get him in trouble. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I don't know if you remember me, but I wanted to thank you." Thomas's eyes shifted slightly to look at her, and a small smile appeared on his face. "Of course I remember you, Sarah. How are you doing?" "I'm doing wonderfully, thanks to you and everyone else who showed me kindness that day. I heard you got the job with Margaret's grandson. How is that working out?" Sarah beamed. "It's amazing. I'm working on campaigns for small businesses and nonprofits, helping them tell their stories authentically. It's exactly what I hoped marketing could be." "That's wonderful to hear. But more than the job, you taught me something that changed my entire life. You showed me that vulnerability isn't weakness, and that authentic human connection is possible even in the most unexpected circumstances." Thomas felt deeply moved by her words. "You taught me something too, Sarah. You reminded me that sometimes the most important part of serving others is simply seeing them and acknowledging their humanity." Sarah reached into her portfolio and pulled out a printed article. "I wanted to show you this. Michael, the photographer who was there that day, wrote a story about what happened. It was published in several newspapers and shared thousands of times online." Thomas looked at the headline. "When kindness breaks protocol, a royal guard's compassion changes everything." "The response has been incredible," Sarah continued. "I've received dozens of messages from people who were going through similar struggles and found hope in the story. Some of them have found jobs. Others have sought help for mental health issues, and many have simply been inspired to show more kindness to strangers." Thomas read through the article quickly, amazed at how Michael had captured not just the events of that day, but the deeper meaning behind them. "There's something else," Sarah said. "Margaret's grandson James was so inspired by the story that he started a program at his company. Once a month, they offer free marketing services to job seekers, helping them create professional portfolios and learn interview skills. That's incredible. And Lisa's support group has tripled in size. People read the article and realize they didn't have to face unemployment alone. We're actually looking for a bigger meeting space. Thomas shook his head in amazement. I had no idea that breaking protocol for a few minutes could have such far-reaching effects. That's the thing about kindness, Sarah said. You never know how far it will travel or how many lives it will touch. Captain Williams approached them, having noticed Sarah's return. Ms. Mitchell, good to see you again. How are things going? Very well, thank you. I was just telling Thomas about some of the positive outcomes from our story being shared. That story has had an impact here too, Captain Williams said. We've had several discussions about the balance between following protocol and serving people. Your interaction has become part of our training conversations about when flexibility and compassion should guide our actions. Sarah felt honored that their experience was being used to help train other guards. I hope it helps them understand that sometimes people who seem difficult are really just people who are hurting. It absolutely does. In fact, we've had 2 similar situations since then where guards chose to respond with compassion rather than simply calling for removal. Both situations ended positively, with the distressed individuals getting the help they needed. Thomas felt proud to be part of an organization that was willing to learn and grow from their experience. There's something I wanted to ask both of you, Sarah said. James and I are organizing a community event next month, a job fair combined with workshops on resilience and authentic communication. We're calling it Breaking Protocol for Kindness. Would you be willing to speak about your experience? Thomas looked uncertain. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to participate in something like that. Captain Williams considered the request. Actually, I think this could be a valuable form of community outreach. If you're interested, Thomas, I'll speak with our superiors about getting approval. I'd be honored to participate, Thomas said. Sarah clapped her hands together excitedly. That would be wonderful. We already have Margaret, David, Lisa, and several of the other people from that day committed to participating. As they continued talking, a small crowd began to gather, much like it had 3 months earlier. But this time, people were drawn by the positive energy of the conversation rather than conflict. A young man approached hesitantly. Excuse me, are you the people from that article about kindness at the palace? Sarah smiled. Yes, we are. I just wanted to say thank you. I read your story when I was going through my own job search struggles. It inspired me to be more open about my difficulties and to ask for help. I found a job 2 weeks later. More people began sharing similar stories. A middle-aged woman talked about how the article had inspired her to volunteer at a local homeless shelter. A teenager mentioned that it had encouraged him to reach out to a classmate who seemed to be struggling. Thomas realized that their brief interaction 3 months ago had created ripples of kindness that were still spreading throughout the community. You know what amazes me most about all this? Sarah said to Thomas as the crowd eventually dispersed. What's that? 3 months ago, I thought my life was over because I couldn't find a job. I was so focused on what I didn't have that I couldn't see all the possibilities around me. But when you chose to see me as a person instead of just a problem, it opened my eyes to a completely different way of living. How do you mean? I realized that life isn't about achieving certain milestones or having the perfect career. It's about connecting with other people, helping each other through difficult times, and being brave enough to show our authentic selves to the world. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. I think that day changed me too. It reminded me that the most important rules aren't the ones written in manuals. They're the ones written in our hearts about how we should treat each other. As Sarah prepared to leave, she turned back to Thomas one more time. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for showing me that kindness is always the right choice, even when it's not the easy choice. Thank you for teaching me that. Sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones who seem the angriest on the outside. Sarah walked away from Buckingham Palace with a heart full of gratitude and a renewed commitment to spreading the same kindness that had saved her. She knew that her life would never be the same, and she was grateful for every moment of the journey that had brought her to this point of joy and purpose. The story of their encounter would continue to inspire people for years to come, proving that a single moment of human compassion can change not just 2 lives but an entire community.